Chapter 13. Over his attempts to come up with something to bring Asher besides bad quality stew, Darius has come to realize that he really doesn't know how to make many intricate dishes. He can dry, salt, grill, or fry meats, and clean fruits and vegetables to eat raw or grilled. He can boil things to make stew. He's pretty sure he could mash some things together to make pemmican, but he wouldn't curse even Asher with pemmican. He doesn't have flour to make bread or pastries, and he doesn't have dairy to make cheese, butter, or anything milk goes into. Even besides all that, he doesn't have a lot to transport food inside of. All of this passes through his mind as he gazes down at the creature he had managed to snare. While resting from setting up his smithy, he'd been playing around with some of the willowbane, and found it too thick to break without a sharp implement. Using it, a few sticks, his shovel, and a young bent-over tree, he'd managed to make a simple animal trap. And one day, when he had checked it, he'd found one of those deer-like creatures that populate the Isle's thick forests, with the tine leg caught in it. It took a while to get close enough to deliver the killing blow with his shovel, and his chest ached every time the animal struggled, but eventually he had gotten it down with a swift chop to the base of its neck. Most of the meat sits on a makeshift drying rack in the sunshine. Darius attempted to preserve the pelt, but failed miserably. Its tattered remains sit beside the drying rack, and Darius has a select few cuts of meat that he deemed good enough to serve as an excuse to get to Asher again. But he can't cook it here. It'd be limp and pathetic by the time he got it to Asher. Maybe Asher would let him use his stove. Or maybe Asher would be satisfied with raw meat. Either way, Darius packs up those few cuts, along with some vegetables, and heads toward Asher's tree. However horrifying his previous encounter with the deity had been, Darius still has some unfinished business with Asher. He needs his gun back first of all. He also wants to ask some questions. Simple, non-offensive things like how long Darius had been in this world before leaving. Eventually, he wants to figure out why Asher's so prone to attack, what makes him act violent, and using that knowledge, he hopes he can avoid the god's wrath in the future. But all of that requires approaching Asher, and if he's learned anything about his soul companion, he knows that food will always put Asher in a better mood. Darius clears the tree line and heads through the orchard toward Asher's tree. He's never sure how to get inside. He doesn't want to surprise Asher, so he just ends up calling his name again, and soon he sees the shadow of Asher's form on the usual balcony, and he's bit inside beneath one of the roots, Asher reaching down to point it out. But as Darius heads beneath that root and up through the tree, approaching the kitchen, his walking space gets narrower. All around him sit boxes, wooden boxes, metal boxes, wire boxes, all filled with pastries. His mouth waters at the sight of them, and he tries to keep his eyes away, but he can't. It's been so long since he's had something baked, something golden and flaky, something oozing with some sort of sweet, brownish-looking jam, and, oh, that one has a sprinkling of granulated sugar. It's been so long since he's had anything sweet at all. He grits his teeth, picking his way toward the kitchen with his little sack full of meat and vegetables. Asher's in the kitchen, which is, again, laden high with everything sweet and tart. It's all from apples. Peels coat one of the counters. The sink's full of soaking pots and pans. A mound of apples sits by the doorway to the balcony. There's flour spilled all over the other counter, and bits of dough, and the oven's on, and there's something bubbling in a pot over the open fire, and the table. It's piled high with food, a pile of food taller than the table itself. Darius blinks a few times, feeling tears well up. His belly hurts for just a taste of anything in this room. Asher glances back at Darius from where he stands at the stove, stirring something in a small saucepan. "Hey," he says before turning back and inspecting the contents of the saucepan. "I hope you know there's no escape. You're taking some of this home with you." "Really?" Darius nearly drops what he's carrying. He swallows and tamps down the urge to swipe and devour whatever's closest to him. Thank you, Asher. I would really love that." "Want to help with this?" Asher asks, gesturing to the stove. Darius feels an obligation to, but he has no idea what Asher's doing. "I don't want to mess it up," he says. "No way you can mess this up. Come on." Darius steps over and peers into the pot. He'd know that golden sheen anywhere. It's caramel. Real-life caramel. He takes a deep breath of the hot, sickly sweet air. "I turn away for 1 second and the damn thing keeps crystallizing on me," Asher says with a low growl. "I can keep focused on it if you can stab an apple and dip it in." He gestures next to the stove, where Darius sees a pile of wooden skewers poking out from the mess. "Okay," Darius says with uncertainty. He turns and sets his bag down beneath the table, then turns back and picks up one of the sharp sticks. He finds an apple, one of the dozens in this room, and, assuming this is what Asher wants him to do, tries to stick the skewer through the top. "You're upside down," Asher says. Darius's cheeks darken as he flips the apple over and skewers it. "And now?" "Dip it into the caramel. Slowly." He gently lowers the apple into the saucepan, finding himself leaning over Asher's shoulder. "There," Asher says. "Gently. Turn it over slowly. Coat it completely." Darius follows Asher's instructions, though he wants nothing more than to pick the apple up and lick all the caramel off. Asher directs Darius to a row of bowls, each filled with different toppings, and he won't answer which ones he wants on the apple. He tells Darius to surprise him. Darius recognizes chocolate immediately, and he hasn't had chocolate since his childhood. And there's also something rainbow-colored, a few somethings actually, and something a bit larger and white, and tiny white shavings of coconut? That has to be what that is, and... "Darius, it's getting cold." Darius jumps. He rolls the caramel-coated apple in chocolate, then sets it aside, on a sheet of waxed paper, along with a few dozen apples already coated. As Darius picks up another apple, Asher speaks. "So," the god says, "what brings you here?" "I brought some more food for you," Darius says. "I was hoping you'd let me cook it here for you, but I can see you're kind of busy." "If it's anything but apples, I'm going to ask you to start cooking immediately," Asher says, chuckling. "It's meat," Darius says, and Asher interrupts before he can say any more. "Meat! Perfect. Here, I'll move over. You're welcome to use anything in the cabinets. I'll just use up the last of this caramel, and then we can eat. Oh, I'll finally get to quell the meat hunger." Asher hums in delight as Darius goes back to the table to get his bag. Darius bends down and picks it up, taking a deep breath. All of a sudden, it's like he has the weight of this whole planet behind him. Asher's eagerness is heavy. A shudder works its way through Darius's chest. He closes his eyes. His mother had taught him some about cooking before she was killed. "I just need a skillet and some oil," he says. Without even looking, Asher kicks open one of the cupboards by his feet, revealing a selection of various clear glass bottles, some which Darius can recognize as oils and vinegars, some he doesn't know. Then he reaches over to the sink and taps one of the pans. "Sorry, I used them all," he says. "But you know how to wash. Soap's in that bottle behind the sink." Darius sets his bag down again and goes to wash the pan. The soap's a strange color, a bluish sheen with an iridescence to it as well. And it's a liquid as well. Figuring it's already been watered down, Darius pours a few tablespoons into the dirty pan, then picks up a discarded towel to scrub with. The soap doesn't sting at all, and it foams up quite a bit, soon filling the sink. But there's no doubt that pan's clean. After rinsing off the pan and pouring some oil in, Darius lays a few cuts of the meat inside and watches them burble and simmer. A strange sense of calmness wells up within him as he feels Asher standing next to him. He remembers his mother's presence next to him as the meat had sizzled in the pan over the fire. They had taken some of the coal from the traveling forge to maintain it, and in the morning they would throw some dirt over it to make sure all the fire's out. That was Darius's favorite part. "You want it to make some noise," his mother had said. "That means it's hot enough to cook evenly." Darius frowns down at the pan. He hadn't waited very long for the oil to heat up, and the meat's quiet now. But just make sure it's cooked all the way through. Darius could feel his mother's hand on the back of his head, fingers laced through his curls. You remember how to do that, right? She had flipped the meat over. Darius flips the meat over, hearing the other side sizzle to life. Cut it down the middle, Darius murmurs to himself. Make sure the inside of the thickest portion isn't cold. What? Asher asks, yanking Darius out from his memory. Nothing, he says with a huff. Every time he has a memory like this, the wound reopens. At least he eventually got justice, even if it meant he now has to stay in this world with this powerful, volatile being standing right next to him, who can mutilate his body and threaten to devour him one day and offer him apple pastries not a week later. But thinking on his past, Darius remembers he had something to ask Asher. You mentioned that I was here for a long time, he says. When I was in my box. I mean, when I was just sitting in my house. Asher nods. How long was that time? Darius asks. I don't have a good memory of it. Asher shrugs. About 400 years. With a sudden, cold numbness coursing through his body, Darius leans forward and grips the edge of the counter. Whoa, Asher says, stepping away from him. I didn't think you'd have that strong of a reaction. You didn't? Darius stammers. 400 years. More than the rest of the life he's lived. All spent in his box. He doesn't even consider how that might be possible. He figures it has something to do with Asher's magic, but how he could have spent so long in there with such little issue. Didn't he get hungry? Thirsty? Didn't he sleep? Calm down, Asher says, and he feels the god taking his hand. Darius is guided forward, and he hears a bunch of apples hitting the floor, and Asher turns him around and pushes him to sit down. He leaps up from the chair like it's coated in hot coals, and backs away from Asher. He doesn't want to go in his box again. I can't, he stammers, feeling like he can't get enough breath in his lungs. He doesn't want to sit, but he can't feel the ground under him. He feels like he's going to topple over, and before he knows it, he's tilting back and facing the ceiling instead of Asher. He feels a pressure on his sides and on his back, and suddenly, he's looking at Asher again. Asher's arms extend into bulky, fleshy claws that hold Darius from behind, the way a man would dip a woman in one of those exotic dances. It's okay, Asher says. Come on, let's sit down. I don't want that to happen again, Darius groans. I won't let it, Asher says. It happens when I get scared, Darius says. There's no reason to be scared, Asher says. 400 years, Darius murmurs. I know, Asher says. Darius lays in Asher's claws, panting, gazing up at the ceiling, which seems to tilt and sway. Do you want me to take the fear away? Asher asks. Darius doesn't know exactly what that means, but it has to be better than this. Yes. Asher puts a hand on Darius's belly, just below his ribcage. Confused, Darius attempts to glance back at the hands holding him before realizing that this third hand sprouted from the middle of Asher's chest. Breathe deeply for me, Asher murmurs. It'll help me do this. Darius sucks in a breath. Hold it for a bit. There. Let it out slowly. Darius breathes out. His limbs start to tingle. He feels a small cramp in his belly beneath Asher's hand, but it's easy to ignore. Soon, the blinding panic fades, and Darius is left with the numb sight of the trashed kitchen around them. There, Asher says. His unnaturally large limbs slowly lower Darius to sit on the ground. Feeling better? Not by much, Darius sighs. Then let's work through all this before it comes up again, Asher says, letting his grotesque arms return to their normal proportions and letting that third arm sink back into his skin. What are you afraid of? 400 years, Darius repeats, barely able to feel his tongue. All right, what's scary about that? Humans shouldn't live that long. Asher nods sagely. But this world is different, he says. And you know my power. I didn't know you could make people not age, Darius says, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. He can't help it, but it's frustrating to keep learning things about Asher. I didn't know you could make it so that people didn't need to eat or drink. I can do the first, but not the second, Asher explains with a sigh. It's relatively easy to shut off someone's senescence. Just give the body some more instructions. Regenerate the telomeres, keep mutations to a minimum, preserve and replenish the parts of cells that contribute to nutrient sensing and autophagy. Darius feels a pulsing pain around his forehead. What about eating and drinking? He asks. Oh, Asher says, I took care of that for you. Darius feels a tightness in his chest at the thought of Asher having anything to do with what Darius had put in his body. How? I fed and watered you, Asher says with a shrug. I watered every other day and fed about twice a week. Your whole body was in a state of massive conservation, seriously decreased metabolism. I think part of it was my fault, the changes I made to your body, but it was amazing to witness. Why did you do this to me? Darius asks. Why did you keep me alive? Asher blinks. I don't know. End of chapter 13.